So I've had several friends request that I make a video showing how we make a knife. This particular one, we use an old lawnmower blade. It's got to go in the forge early on. This does a couple things. First, it softens it up. It takes the temper out of it from when it was hardened to be a lawnmower blade. Second, as you can see, it needs to be pounded flat. These things are already bent, bowed, and crooked when they're all right. And then after, a few seasons of getting banged around on rocks, they're all full of dents. So the very first thing we have to do is make it so it is a flat, straight piece of steel. Once we straighten it out, we clean it up, draw a simple knife shape, and then cut it into a general basic knife shape. Now you're going to notice it still looks pretty rough even after we get it cut to the smallest piece, and at that point we have to bring it over to do some detail work. On that, we use a 2-inch by 72-inch grinder, belt grinder, from Northridge Tool. Thankfully, this thing makes it a lot easier. Like anything else, you have to start with good equipment. After the basic shape is there, we put a blue paint called Dykem on the edge. Then you measure the blade, find out what the thickness is, cut that thickness back in half, and then draw a line through that paint, or the Dykem, that shows where the center of the edge is going to be, the tip of the edge. And since I grind everything freehand without using jigs, it keeps my eyes honest, so that it's tipped exactly where it should be, so that it comes together into the point right in the center of the new blade. At this point, since the blade is as soft as it's going to be, we're going to drill and file the choil, and this is the small area between the blade and the ricasso. Then we're also going to drill the holes for the scales, or the handle. At that point, it's time to start the rough bevel. And again, I do everything by hand. A lot of people use jigs. I don't know which is better. I'm sure I would produce a better looking finished product if I used a jig, but I kind of enjoy doing it by hand. This is where it actually starts to look a little bit more like a knife. It takes the edge, and all we do from this point forward is continue to grind until the bevel is exactly where we want it to be. And we just change belts and go a little finer and a little finer before we start the heat treating process. I try to remove as much metal as needs to be removed, not really getting into the polishing category before the heat treating comes up, because it's going to be much harder from that point forward. After the knife is taken what's close to its final shape, it's time to heat treat it again. So at this point, we're going to heat it up to a critical temperature. I check it with a magnet. If a magnet doesn't stick to it anymore, then working with tool steel like this, high carbon steel, is at its critical temperature. We quench it in oil. If the blade comes out nice and straight, then we just clean it up, because it all turns black and scaly after the heat treating. So we have to clean it up again. Not a final finish or anything, just try to get most of that black carbon and soot off from it. Then it's time to temper it. After we run it through the quench, it is a little bit too hard and it's actually brittle. So we heat it up and then let it cool very slowly. That makes it hard and it keeps a good edge, but it's not brittle anymore. At that point, we go to some very fine belts on the grinder, and that allows us to start working on the final finish. Just like before, we change belts frequently during this, going a little finer and a little bit finer until we get the look that we want. It's pretty amazing, and it doesn't take long before that old rusty lawnmower blade actually starts to look like a nice polished knife. After the bulk of the metal work is done, we wrap it all in tape to protect it and start work on the handle. The first step is to measure the material that you're going to use for the handle. In this case, it's a linen micarta. It's a linen cloth in a resin, a fiberglass type resin material. Then we cut it to size, rough cut, using a saw. All we have to do from that point forward is match the holes and then epoxy it together. I use several different types of epoxy, and typically it is a 5-minute set time, but I usually let it dry for 24 hours, clamped under pressure, as well as being pinned with a solid brass pin. There are several steps that are very, very messy, and they include a lot of gloves and masks and eye protection. It's an easy way to get hurt, and not just over time, but in the moment. So there's a lot of safety equipment to choose when making knives. And after a little bit of time passes, in this case 24 hours on this step, we cut off the excess brass on the pins. Now we start using a more aggressive belt, again working our way down to finer belts to polish it, and the handle really starts to take shape. After the handle is done, then it's time to put a maker's mark on it. Now, I call my knives ghost knives, and I built an etching machine. I use an electric etching machine with a saline solution to put the maker's mark on it. It's a pretty fast process, and it's pretty quick to clean up. And as you'll see soon, the maker's mark looks nice and professional. And then it's time for the most dangerous machine in the entire shop, the buffing wheel. This is absolutely the most dangerous part, but it really gives you a beautiful finished product. There's absolutely no hint of an old lawnmower blade or an old file, as I use in many cases, and it actually looks like something much nicer than anything I should be able to do, and I still have a lot to learn. I really like the maker's mark. It gives it that finished professional look, and again, it doesn't resemble in any way, shape, or form an old lawnmower blade anymore, but I've still got plenty to learn. Check out my Facebook page. It's facebook.com/ghostknifeblades. I hope that you enjoyed this short video.